All right, y'all. This is an article based off of Lagos Locals Fear Annual Carnival links to Brazil past are being lost. All right, excuse me. It says streets of Nigeria commercial hub to fill a Saturday for annual party. The legacy of slave descendants will return to their ancestral homeland. And it was done by a lady named Monica Mark, May 2015. All right. It say before he had died earlier this year, 86-year-old great grandfather Mr. Iberu, however you pronounce it, decided he had finally had enough of Lagos Annual Carnival. It's become boring, grumbled the fine boned man with a halo white hair, tapping his cane impatiently. When our forefathers used to do it, that was real dancing and we had better costumes. Now, peep with the 86-year-old grandfather Mr. Eburu decided he had finally had enough. Now, peep what he just said. Now, he telling you that when he said when our forefathers did it, meaning the people that that gave him it, when they did it, it was real dance and everything was real. So now when he starts to talk, he finna break down basically and start speaking on certain points of how Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and another part of West Africa actually get their culture from Brazil. And he gonna prove it. He gonna state a lot of things in this article. This article is it's a dope article. All right, it says when Ibaru begins sewing outfits for the parade 7 decades ago, the festival was closer to its origins in the 19th century. Rural Brazil. All right, let me say that again. When Ibaru began sewing outfits for the parade 7 decades ago, the festival was closer to its origin in 19th century rural Brazil. The annual street party arrived in Lagos via free slave descendants who returned to their ancestral homeland, including Ibaru's own grandmother. So the person that's giving a little insight, even his own grandmother was part of this. So it says, on the streets, everyone here spoke Portuguese and ate Brazilian food. He recalled sitting beneath a bronze plaque of an ox head. Now, he said people here spoke Portuguese and ate Brazilian food. Now, they are in West Africa. Now, keep that in mind. What they're talking about is in West Africa. Okay, Brazilian food. He recalled sitting beneath a bronze plaque of an ox head, the symbol of the folk festival, which was translated to Nigeria. On Saturday, the streets of Nigeria commercial capital will fill for the annual Lagos Carnival. The biggest and brightest in the West Africa carnivals across the region are just one way in which 10,000s of Brazilians and to a lesser extent Cuban repatriates left their mark on a crescent of nations stretching from Sierra Leone to Nigeria. Now, an African dude once told me, oh, repatriates, that means that they left and came back. Okay, so now it breaks down. It says, and to a lesser extent Cuban repatriates left their mark on a crescent of nations stretching from Sierra Leone to Nigeria. So evidently when they mean repatriates, that just mean a person that just came back, to the part where they left they crescent on. So let's continue. But in Lagos, some of the communities fear fragile links to the past are in danger of being lost. So these people fear that the Brazilian culture is being lost, not Nigerian culture, not West African culture, not Sierra Leone culture, nothing. They worried about the Brazilian culture being lost here. And that's the whole key to this article. That's what I find interesting. I like this article. Okay. Fear fragile links to the past in danger of being lost. Okay, Brazil was the last country to abolish slavery, but had a thriving class of Arstians, and jumble of those had worked their way to the freedom where various mixed races or were born free. Many began arriving to seek their fortunes in Nigeria. At the turn of the 19th century, by 1880, almost a decade before Brazil abolished slavery, their numbers had swelled to almost 1 in 10 of Lagos' approximately 40,000 inhabitants. Okay, let me read that again. It say, by 1880, almost a decade before Brazil abolished slavery, their numbers had swelled to almost 1/10 of Lagos, approximately 40,000 inhabitants. So 40,000 inhabitants, 40,000 people went to Brazil. That's basically what it's saying. 1880, by 1880, almost a decade before Brazil abolished slavery, their numbers had swelled to almost 1/10 of Lagos, approximately 40,000 inhabitants. Okay, outside Ibero peeling yellow veranda in Lagos Campos district, a visitor might be forgiven for thinking they had stepped onto the streets of colonial Brazil. Let me say that again, okay? It say outside Ibaru, I gotta figure out how to say his name. Ibaru peeling yellow veranda in Lagos Campos district, a visitor might be forgiven for thinking they had stepped onto the streets of colonial area Brazil. So they saying with the way that these people came and set up this area, it's a exact representation of Brazil. You get what I'm saying? Like, you won't even think you in fucking West Africa. You gonna think you in Brazil because there's so much Brazilian American shit there. So let's move on. Pastel colored houses and distinctive Afro-Brazilian style dot the neighborhood like bright, sweet dropped aimed the concrete and skyscrapers. Let me say that again. Okay. Pastel colored houses in the distinctive Afro-Brazilian style dot the neighborhood like bright, sweet, dropped, aimed, and concrete skyscrapers. Okay. Then it say Salvador Piero Cruz, Vera Cruz, Fiera, Dos Santos, said residents Garciano Martins, 65, rattling off the typical Brazilian surnames of his neighbors in the district, also known as Popo Aguda. I think that's how you pronounce it. Roughly translated as the Brazilian Quarter. So Popo Aguda means the Brazilian Quarter. So if you in Lagos today and you in a park called Popo Aguda, you're in the Brazilian Quarters. Okay? I like this little article. I like this article. Okay, it say my parents used to talk about the food. They missed the food. Today we think of tomato, chili, and cassava as our own homegrown food, but it was the returnees that brought them here. So the people that came from Brazil came there, you feel me, and then decided to come back to Lagos, the returnees, because they returned to where they, once was. Feel me? They brought that there. Say that again. I say my parents used to talk about the food. They miss the food today. We think of tomato, chili, and cassava as our own homegrown food, but it was the returnees that brought them here. Unofficial national dishes such as eba, cassava mashed to a dough-like consistency were adapted from the Americas, much like the English did with the tea grown in India. Okay, so it says those who return with skills and knowledge that help make colonial Lagos a buzzing melting pot and trade hub. So the people of Brazil made this spot a fucking buzz spot, literally. Like, this shit is ridiculous, okay? I like this article. I'm gonna say this again. All right. The city was the second in the world to have street lamps after London. A returnee who introduced piped water. A returnee who introduced piped water. So a Brazilian man introduced piped water to these people in Lagos, aka West Africa, okay? And possibly Sierra Leone, okay? So piped water became one of the region's richest men. The grand 2-story home where he lived, known as Waterhouse, still stands among skyscrapers downtown, and novel ideas like catalysm, I can't get that word out. Catalysm were introduced. Catholicism, however you say it was introduced. There was a lot of prestige in coming back. They had money, but they would also be third or even fourth class citizens if they remained in Brazil, said Cecil Tilly Gatto, director of African Heritage. So I once read that part right there where it said there was a lot of prestige in coming back. They had money, but they would always be third or even fourth class citizen if they remain in Brazil. So the African brother that asked me this, he like, okay, so who is they referred to? So now that I'm reading this again, I think they're referring to the people that actually from Lagos and left there to Brazil. And it says, okay, let me see it again. There was a lot of prestige in coming back. They had money, but they would always be third or even fourth class citizen if they remained in Brazil. So if they would have stayed in Brazil, they still wouldn't have been, of high class in Brazil. You get what I'm saying? If I'm